The crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin cast their warm glow across the dining room, their light dancing off the polished silverware and crystal glasses. Solomon Pierce adjusted his Tom Ford suit cuff, a gesture more habitual than necessary. At 42, he had mastered the art of commanding attention without seeming to seek it. His dark brown eyes surveyed the restaurant's elegant interior, taking in every detail with the same precision he applied to multi-million-dollar deals. "Is the wine not to your liking?" Arya Blanchard's voice cut through his thoughts. Soft and practiced, she sat across from him, a vision in a champagne-colored Valentino dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 22, she possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads and dropped jaws, but Solomon had long since learned that beauty was the most common currency in Manhattan. "It's fine," he replied, his voice carrying that slight edge of authority that had become his trademark. The 2015 Chateau Margaux was more than fine. It was exceptional, just like everything else he surrounded himself with, including Arya. She smiled, that perfectly rehearsed smile that never quite reached her green eyes. "You seem distracted tonight. Another hostile takeover keeping you up." Before Solomon could answer, movement at the restaurant's entrance caught his eye. His hand tightened imperceptibly around the stem of his wine glass as he watched Alara Keene being led to a table by the maitre d'. She wore a black Alexander McQueen dress that hugged her athletic frame, her long brown hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. The scent of her signature Chanel Coco Mademoiselle seemed to reach him across the room, though he knew that was impossible. But it wasn't Alara's presence alone that made his jaw clench. It was the man walking beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Dexter Wainwright, CEO of Wainwright Industries, and if the gossip columns were to be believed, the man who had succeeded where Solomon had failed, making Alara happy. Solomon. Arya's voice had taken on a sharper edge. She had followed his gaze, and her perfectly manicured fingers now gripped her fork with slightly too much force. "Isn't that your ex?" He didn't answer immediately, watching as Dexter pulled out Alara's chair, leaning down to whisper something in her ear that made her laugh. The sound carried across the restaurant, genuine and unrestrained, so different from the careful laughter that filled most high society gatherings. "Yes," he finally said, taking a deliberate sip of his wine. "Though I wasn't aware she frequented Le Bernardin." Arya's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite hide her displeasure. "Well, her new boyfriend certainly seems to be keeping her in the lifestyle she's accustomed to." She paused, studying Solomon's face with the kind of calculation that reminded him why he'd chosen her as his companion. "Though I doubt Wainwright Industries can compete with Pierce Enterprises in terms of resources." Solomon's eyes narrowed slightly. Arya was right about one thing. Wainwright Industries couldn't compete with his company. At least, not yet. But the rumors about Dexter's latest business moves had been keeping Solomon's board of directors up at night. A potential deal with Asian markets that could shift the balance of power in Manhattan's financial district. "I heard they're quite serious," Arya continued, clearly enjoying the slight tension in Solomon's shoulders. "Page 6 says he's been ring shopping at Cartier." The crystal glass in Solomon's hand caught the light, throwing prisms across the white tablecloth. He remembered the ring he'd once bought for Alara, a custom-designed Graf diamond that had cost more than most people's homes. She'd returned it the night she left, placing it on his desk, without a word. The same night he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, though he'd never admit that to anyone, least of all himself. "Dexter always did have pedestrian taste," Solomon remarked, his voice carrying just enough disdain to make Arya laugh. But his eyes were fixed on the way Alara's hand brushed against Dexter's as they studied their menus, the casual intimacy of the gesture feeling like a personal affront. "Should we send them a bottle of wine?" Arya suggested, her tone innocent but her eyes calculating. "It would be the polite thing to do, wouldn't it?" Solomon finally turned his full attention to his date, seeing her clearly for the first time that evening. Arya was beautiful, yes, but she was also sharp, perhaps sharper than he'd given her credit for. She understood power plays, understood that in their world, politeness could be wielded like a weapon. "No," he said firmly, signaling the sommelier for another bottle. "They're clearly enjoying their evening. It would be inappropriate to interrupt." Arya's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. Since when does Solomon Pierce care about being appropriate? He didn't answer, but his mind was already racing ahead, analyzing angles and possibilities like the strategic chess player he'd always been. Dexter Wainwright's presence at Le Bernardin tonight couldn't be a coincidence. Not when rumors of his company's expansion plans were swirling through Wall Street. Not when he was dining with the one woman who knew Solomon's weaknesses better than anyone else. The sommelier appeared with their second bottle, going through the ritual of presentation and tasting with practiced efficiency. Solomon barely noticed, his attention divided between his own thoughts and the couple across the room. Ilara was animated, her hands moving gracefully as she spoke, her green eyes bright with enthusiasm. She looked free, unburdened, everything she hadn't been in the final months of their relationship. You know, Arya said, swirling her fresh glass of wine. Some people might think you're still not over her. Solomon's gaze snapped back to her, cold and sharp. Some people would be mistaken. Would they? She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who's just realized he let something valuable slip through his fingers. Careful, Arya, he warned, though his tone remained perfectly civil. You're overstepping. She sat back, a flash of genuine emotion, hurt, anger, fear, crossing her face before her practiced smile returned. My apologies. I forgot that Solomon Pierce doesn't make mistakes. He only makes calculated decisions. The irony in her voice wasn't lost on him, but he chose to ignore it. Instead, he found his attention drawn once again to Ilara's table, where Dexter was now showing her something on his phone, their heads bent close together in shared amusement. The intimacy of the gesture made something twist in Solomon's chest, something he refused to acknowledge as jealousy. A burst of laughter from their table cut through the restaurant's ambient noise, and Solomon watched as Ilara touched Dexter's arm, her face lit with genuine joy. The sight triggered a memory he'd thought he'd buried. Ilara, in their penthouse, laughing at something he'd said, her eyes full of love and trust, before everything fell apart, before his need for control and power had poisoned what they had. Should we order dessert? Arya's voice pulled him back to the present. She was watching him with a mixture of calculation and resignation, as if she'd just confirmed something she'd long suspected. No, Solomon said, signaling for the check. I have an early meeting tomorrow. It wasn't true, and they both knew it. But Arya simply nodded, gathering her Hermes clutch with practiced grace. As the waiter processed his black card, Solomon allowed himself one final glance at Ilara's table. She was looking at Dexter the way she used to look at him, with warmth, with trust, with something that might have been love. The realization hit him with unexpected force. He hadn't brought Arya to Le Bernardin to prove he was over Ilara. He'd brought her to prove he still had power, still had control. But watching Ilara now, radiant and independent, he was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the greatest show of power was knowing when to let go, and he had never been good at letting go. As they stood to leave, Arya's hand sliding into the crook of his arm with practiced ease, Solomon made a decision. If Dexter Wainwright thought he could take everything, his market share, his power, and now Ilara, he was about to learn a harsh lesson about the true nature of power in New York City. The game was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Solomon's penthouse office at Pierce Enterprises, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. He stood at the window, Rolex catching the light as he brought his coffee cup to his lips, his dark eyes fixed on the Manhattan skyline. The previous night's encounter at Le Bernardin had left him restless, his usual iron grip on his emotions slightly loosened. Mr. Pierce. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Harrison from Legal is here with the files you requested. Solomon pressed the intercom button. Send him in. Timothy Harrison entered, carrying a thick folder stamped with Confidential. At 58, he was one of the few people Solomon truly trusted, a shrewd lawyer who had been with Pierce Enterprises since Solomon's father's time. Tell me you found something, Solomon said, not turning from the window. Wainwright's been careful, Harrison replied, spreading documents across the desk. But there's always a paper trail if you dig deep enough. The Asian market deal. It's bigger than we thought. He's not just looking to expand, he's trying to corner the entire Southeast Asian technology sector. Now Solomon turned, his interest piqued. Explain. He's been quietly acquiring smaller tech firms in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia for the past 8 months. Shell companies, holding corporations, all leading back to Wainwright Industries through a maze of subsidiaries. Harrison pulled out a complex organizational chart. But here's where it gets interesting. The timing of these acquisitions coincides perfectly with when he started dating Alara. Solomon finished, his jaw tightening. He moved to his desk, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. She knows our Asian strategy inside and out. She helped develop it. You think she told him? Solomon's hand clenched around his coffee cup. Alara wouldn't. He stopped himself. The woman he saw last night, laughing with Dexter, was not the same woman he'd known. Pull everything we have on Wainwright's recent movements. Every deal, every meeting, every phone call. There's something else, Harrison said, hesitating slightly. The night before Wainwright began his acquisition spree, there was a dinner meeting at the Modern. The reservation was under his name, but the security footage shows Alara was there too. They stayed for 3 hours. The coffee cup made a sharp sound as Solomon set it down. Get me that footage. Already done. Harrison produced a USB drive. But Solomon, are you sure you want to go down this road? If this becomes personal. This isn't personal. Solomon cut him off. This is business. Wainwright's trying to undermine Pierce Enterprises. I'm simply protecting my interests. Harrison nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. Just be careful. Sometimes when we dig for answers, we find things we wish we hadn't. Alone again, Solomon plugged the USB drive into his laptop. The security footage was grainy but clear enough. There was Alara, wearing a navy blue dress he'd never seen before, sitting across from Dexter at a corner table. They were leaning close, heads bent over what appeared to be documents. Business documents, or something more personal. His phone buzzed. A text from Arya. Last night was lovely. Dinner again tonight? He ignored it, his attention fixed on the footage. Alara was smiling at something Dexter had said, but it wasn't the carefree smile from Le Bernardin. This was different, more serious, more conspiratorial. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Rebecca Chen, his head of Asian operations, entered with her tablet in hand. We have a problem. Wainwright Industries just announced a partnership with TechCore Singapore. They're positioning themselves as the primary gateway for American investment in Southeast Asian tech startups. TechCore? Solomon's voice was dangerously quiet. That was our deal. They underbid us by 15% and offered better terms. The announcement goes public in an hour. Rebecca paused, choosing her next words carefully. The structure of their proposal? It's eerily similar to our standard approach. Almost as if they had inside information. Solomon finished, his suspicion crystallizing into certainty. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Cancel my afternoon meetings, and get me everything you can on TechCore's board members. I want to know who flipped. After Rebecca left, Solomon found himself staring at the paused image of Alara and Dexter on his screen. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m., exactly the time when most of Pierce Enterprises' Asian market strategy meetings had taken place. Meetings where Alara had always been present, taking meticulous notes, offering brilliant insights. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Wainwright Industries announces groundbreaking Asian tech partnership. The accompanying photo showed Dexter at a podium, looking confident and polished. And there, standing just behind him, was Alara, wearing the same expression of quiet satisfaction she used to wear after closing a major deal for Pierce Enterprises. Solomon opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small black box he hadn't looked at in months. Inside was the Graf diamond ring Alara had returned. He'd kept it as a reminder, though of what, he wasn't quite sure anymore. Perhaps of the price of caring too much, or not caring enough. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Pierce, Ms. Blanchard is here to see you. Solomon closed the box with a sharp snap. Tell her I'm in a meeting. She says it's important. Something about last night. Fine. Give me 5 minutes. He stood, walking to the window again. The city spread out before him. A concrete and glass empire he'd helped build. An empire that now felt surprisingly hollow. His reflection in the glass stared back at him. Impeccable suit. Perfect posture. The very image of power and control. But for the first time in years, he wondered if the cost of maintaining that image had been too high. Arya entered without waiting for his acknowledgement, her Louboutin clicking against the hardwood floor. We need to talk about what happened at Le Bernardin. There's nothing to discuss, Solomon replied, not turning around. Really? Because from where I was sitting, It looked like you spent the entire evening staring at your ex-girlfriend while pretending to be interested in our conversation. Her voice was sharp, lacking its usual carefully cultivated smoothness. I'm not stupid, Solomon. And I'm not just some accessory you can use to make her jealous. Now he did turn, studying her with cold detachment. Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it? Arya moved closer, her green eyes flashing with genuine emotion. You know what I realized last night? You've never once looked at me the way you looked at her. Not once. And I've spent months trying to be perfect for you. The perfect girlfriend, the perfect ornament for your perfect life. But it's never going to be enough, is it? Solomon's expression remained impassive, but something in his chest tightened at her words. They were too close to thoughts he'd been trying to suppress. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time since we started this. Whatever this is. She gestured between them. You don't want a partner, Solomon. You want a possession. Something to control. To show off. To prove that you've moved on. But you haven't moved on, have you? You're still exactly where you were the day she left. Her words hit too close to home, and Solomon's control slipped slightly. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Arya laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what I think? I think you're terrified, not of losing your precious market share to Dexter Wainwright, but of seeing Alara happy without you, because that means you were wrong. That means you didn't just lose her, you drove her away. Solomon's voice turned to ice. I think you should leave. Oh, I'm leaving, but not because you told me to. Arya straightened, and for a moment, Solomon saw a glimpse of someone different, not the carefully crafted socialite type, but a woman coming into her own power. I'm leaving because I finally understand that I deserve better than being someone's second choice. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving Solomon alone with the weight of her words. His phone buzzed again, another news alert about Wainwright Industries' coup in the Asian market. But for once, the business threat seemed secondary to the personal revelations of the past 24 hours. He picked up the black box again, opening it to study the diamond ring that had once represented his future. In its facets, he could see every mistake, every moment of pride that had cost him what he now realized might have been the only real thing in his life. But it was too late for regrets. Alara had moved on. She was with Dexter now, potentially helping him dismantle the empire Solomon had spent his life building. And if there was one thing Solomon Pierce knew how to do, it was to channel emotional pain into strategic action. He pressed the intercom. Get me the board of directors. Emergency meeting in 1 hour. He paused, then added, and send in the PR team. It's time we reminded everyone why Pierce Enterprises dominates this city. The game had changed. It was no longer just about business or power or even revenge. It was about facing the consequences of his choices and deciding, once and for all, what kind of man he truly wanted to be. As the morning sun climbed higher over Manhattan, Solomon Pierce began to plan his next move, knowing that this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. Because this time, he wasn't just fighting for his company, he was fighting for his chance at redemption. The sleek offices of Wainwright Industries occupied the top floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan. Alara Keene sat in her corner office, watching rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her Chanel Coco Mademoiselle perfume mingled with the aroma of her third cup of coffee as she reviewed the final press releases about their Asian market coup. The previous night's encounter with Solomon at Le Bernardin still lingered in her mind. She hadn't expected to see him there, hadn't prepared herself for the weight of his gaze or the familiar scent of his Tom Ford Oud Wood cologne. But more surprising than seeing him had been her own reaction, or rather, the lack of it. Where once his presence would have sent her heart racing, now she felt only a distant echo of what used to be. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Dexter entered, his confident stride matching his impeccable appearance. The scent of Acqua di Gio Profumo announced his presence before he spoke. The Singapore team just confirmed. Everything's set for next week's announcement. Alara nodded, closing her laptop. And the board? Fully on board. He moved behind her chair, his hands resting on her shoulders. You were right about TechCore. They were more than ready to jump ship from Pierce Enterprises. She tensed slightly at the mention of her former employer. It was just business intelligence. Anyone could have predicted their dissatisfaction with Solomon's aggressive expansion tactics, but not everyone would have known exactly how to structure the deal to appeal to them. Dexter's fingers traced light circles on her shoulders. You're being modest, Alara. Your insight was crucial to this victory. She stood, moving away from his touch under the pretense of getting more coffee. Now we should focus on the implementation phase now. Solomon won't take this lying down. Let him try. Dexter's blue eyes gleamed with confidence. He's not the only power player in Manhattan anymore. Alara studied her reflection in the window, remembering another time, another office, another man who exuded the same kind of confidence. Don't underestimate him, Dexter. I've seen what happens to people who do. Is that concern I hear? His tone was light, but there was an edge to it. For him or for us? She turned to face him, her green eyes meeting his steadily. For the deal. We've worked too hard to let anything compromise it now. Dexter moved closer, his expression softening. Have dinner with me tonight. We should celebrate our success. I can't. I have to review the regulatory compliance documents for the merger. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. She needed space, time to think, to process. Tomorrow then. It wasn't a question. The 4 seasons. Just us. She nodded, knowing it would be easier than explaining her sudden need for solitude. Dexter kissed her cheek and left, his cologne lingering in the air along with the unspoken tension between them. Once alone, Alara pulled out her phone, scrolling through her news alerts. As expected, Pierce Enterprises' stock had taken a hit after the TechCore announcement. Solomon would be planning his counterattack already. She could almost picture him in his office, that familiar intensity in his eyes as he plotted his next move. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unlisted number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? It's been a while, Ms. Keene. Timothy Harrison's familiar voice brought back memories of late-night contract reviews and strategy sessions. Tim. She sat down slowly. I assume this isn't a social call. Solomon's on the warpath. He knows about the dinner at the Modern before the acquisition spree began. Ilara's heart skipped a beat, but her voice remained steady. Everything we did was legal. Legal, yes, but you know how he operates. He's convinced you shared proprietary information about Pierce Enterprises' Asian strategy. I didn't, but even as she said it, she remembered all the meetings, all the documentation she'd had access to. Had she unconsciously used that knowledge in structuring deals for Wainwright Industries? He's building a case, Alara, and he's not just targeting Wainwright Industries. He's coming after you, personally. She closed her eyes, remembering the night she'd left Solomon, the look in his eyes when she'd placed the ring on his desk, the words they'd both said that could never be taken back. Why are you telling me this, Tim? There was a long pause. Because I was there when you started at Pierce Enterprises. I watched you grow into one of the sharpest minds in the industry, and I don't want to see you become collateral damage in this war between Solomon and Dexter. I can handle Solomon. Can you? Because the man I saw this morning, he's not thinking clearly, and an unfocused Solomon Pierce is more dangerous than a calculated one. After ending the call, Ilara walked to her private bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The woman in the mirror looked back at her with questioning eyes. Was she really as over Solomon as she'd thought? Or was she just better at hiding it now? Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Keene, Mr. Wainwright would like to see you in the conference room. The legal team is here with some concerns about the merger documentation. I'll be right there. She reapplied her lipstick, straightened her shoulders, and headed to the conference room. The meeting dragged on for hours. A parade of lawyers and executives raising points and counterpoints about regulatory compliance and market risks. But Alara's mind kept drifting to Harrison's warning. She knew Solomon's playbook, had helped write parts of it. He would start with a subtle pressure campaign, probably targeting TechCore's board members individually. Then would come the media leaks, carefully crafted to sow doubt about Wainwright Industries' stability. Ilara? Dexter's voice pulled her back to the present. The team needs your input on the disclosure requirements. She straightened in her chair, pushing thoughts of Solomon aside. This was her life now. Wainwright Industries. Dexter, a future she'd chosen for herself. She wouldn't let the ghosts of her past derail everything she'd worked so hard to build. But later that evening, alone in her office after everyone else had gone home, she found herself opening her personal email, scrolling back through years of archived messages until she found it. The last email she'd sent to Solomon before everything fell apart. And we need to talk about what happened at the board meeting. This isn't who you are, Solomon. The man I fell in love with wouldn't have. She closed the email before finishing it. That night had changed everything. She'd seen a side of Solomon she couldn't unsee. The ruthless corporate raider who would sacrifice anything, anyone, for power and control. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dexter. "Missing you. Come over tonight." She stared at the message, remembering the way he'd looked at her during dinner at Le Bernardin. With affection, yes, but also with the same glint of possessiveness she'd once seen in Solomon's eyes. Was she repeating the same pattern? Trading one controlling man for another? No, she told herself firmly. Dexter was different. He valued her expertise, respected her independence. The fact that their professional success was intertwined didn't diminish their personal connection. Did it? The rain had stopped, leaving the city windows streaked with trailing droplets that caught the lights of neighboring buildings. Ilara gathered her things, deciding to walk home instead of taking a car. She needed the time to think, to strategize. Because Tim was right about one thing. Solomon wouldn't stop until he'd exacted his revenge. And this time, she couldn't afford to let her guard down, couldn't let old feelings cloud her judgment. She'd worked too hard to build her new life, her new identity. As she walked through the bustling Manhattan streets, Ilara made a decision. She wouldn't be a passive player in this game. If Solomon wanted war, she would be ready, not just to defend herself, but to finally prove, to him and to herself, that she was no longer the woman who had walked away that night. She was stronger now, wiser, and if Solomon Pierce thought he could use their past to destroy her future, he was about to learn a harsh lesson about the woman he'd helped create. Pulling out her phone, she typed a quick message to Dexter. "Rain check on tonight. There's something I need to handle first." It was time to remind Manhattan that she wasn't just another player in this game of power and pride. She was a force to be reckoned with. Aria Blanchard stood before the floor-length mirror in her Upper East Side apartment, carefully applying a fresh coat of Dior lipstick. The morning news played in the background, business analysts dissecting the latest developments in the corporate war between Pierce Enterprises and Wainwright Industries. Her reflection stared back at her. Perfect blonde hair, flawless makeup, designer outfit, the very picture of a Manhattan trophy girlfriend. Former trophy girlfriend. She corrected herself mentally. Her phone buzzed with another message from Solomon, the fifth since their confrontation in his office. She ignored it, just as she had ignored the others. The enormous bouquet of white roses he'd sent yesterday sat untouched by her door, their perfume mixing with her signature J'adore fragrance in a way that made her slightly nauseated. In breaking business news, the TV anchor's voice caught her attention. Pierce Enterprises has announced a surprise partnership with Korean tech giant NextCorp, a direct challenge to Wainwright Industries' recent Asian market expansion. Aria turned to watch the coverage, her green eyes narrowing as Solomon appeared on screen. He looked immaculate as always in a custom Tom Ford suit, projecting the same aura of unshakable confidence she'd grown so familiar with, but she could see what others might miss. The slight tension in his jaw, the barely perceptible darkness under his eyes despite expert makeup. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Solomon. "Breakfast? We should talk." Ilara Keene. Aria stared at the message, her heart racing slightly. She'd never spoken directly with Solomon's ex, though she'd spent months studying her from afar, trying to understand what made her different, what made her the one woman Solomon Pierce couldn't seem to forget. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, "La Mercerie, 9 a.m. The French café was relatively quiet when Aria arrived. The morning rush having subsided, she spotted Ilara immediately, sitting at a corner table, her posture radiating the kind of natural confidence Aria had spent years trying to emulate. "Thank you for coming," Ilara said, as Aria sat down. Up close, she was even more striking than in photos. There was an authenticity to her presence that no amount of careful styling could replicate. "I admit, I'm curious about why you wanted to meet." Aria signaled the waiter, ordering a green tea. "I assume it has something to do with Solomon's latest move against Wainwright Industries." A slight smile touched Ilara's lips. "You're direct. I like that." She paused as their drinks arrived. "Actually, I wanted to warn you." "Warn me." "Solomon's on the warpath. And when he's like this, he doesn't just attack his enemies. He eliminates anything he perceives as a weakness." Ilara's green eyes met Aria's steadily, "Including people who know too much." Aria felt a chill despite the cafe's warm atmosphere. "Is that what happened with you?" "No." Ilara's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "With me, it was different. I saw behind the mask he shows the world. saw what he was willing to do to maintain control, and when I confronted him about it, she shrugged elegantly. Let's just say, Solomon doesn't handle challenges to his authority well. Why are you telling me this? Because you're young, beautiful, and ambitious, just like I was when I met him. Ilara leaned forward slightly. But you're also smart enough to have walked away. That makes you dangerous in his eyes. Arya absorbed this, thinking about Solomon's increasingly insistent messages, the flowers, the carefully worded apologies that never quite acknowledged what he was apologizing for. He's not used to being left, she said slowly, especially not now with everything else happening. Exactly. And a wounded Solomon Pierce is unpredictable. Ilara pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. If he tries anything, business pressure, social isolation, financial leverage, call me. I can help. Why would you help me? Because 5 years ago, I wish someone had helped me. Ilara stood, gathering her designer bag. And because sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back, it's helping others avoid the same trap. After Ilara left, Arya sat for a long time, turning the business card over in her hands. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Solomon. We need to talk dinner tonight. Per se. 8 p.m. She could picture it perfectly. The intimate table, the perfectly curated meal, the expensive wine. Solomon would be charming, apologetic even. He would make her feel special, chosen, until the next time she stepped out of line. Instead of responding, she opened her laptop and began typing. Dear Page 6, you've probably been wondering about my recent absence from Solomon Pierce's arm at high society events. Well, I think it's time Manhattan learned the truth about the man behind the power. Her fingers flew over the keys, pouring out everything she'd observed during her months as Solomon's carefully crafted accessory. His obsession with control, his lingering fixation on Ilara, the calculated way he wielded power and privilege like weapons. Just as she was about to hit send, another message appeared on her phone, this time from an unlisted number. Ms. Blanchard, this is Timothy Harrison from Pierce Enterprises Legal Department. I strongly advise against any public statements about Mr. Pierce at this time. Perhaps we should discuss your confidentiality agreement over coffee. Arya's hand trembled slightly as she read the message. Of course Solomon would have anticipated this move. He probably had people monitoring her every communication, waiting for exactly this kind of retaliation. She deleted the draft email, but instead of fear, she felt something else stirring inside her. Determination. Solomon might be able to silence her publicly, but he couldn't control her next move. Opening her contact list, she scrolled to Dexter Wainwright's office number. As Solomon's former girlfriend and confidant, she possessed something potentially more valuable than any corporate secret: intimate knowledge of how Solomon Pierce thought, operated, and most importantly, what he feared. Mr. Wainwright's office, a professional voice answered. This is Arya Blanchard. I have some information, Mr. Wainwright might find interesting regarding Solomon Pierce and the NextCorp deal. There was a pause. One moment, please. As she waited to be connected, Arya caught her reflection in the cafe's window. The perfectly styled blonde hair, the designer outfit, the flawless makeup, all carefully chosen to meet Solomon's exacting standards. But beneath that polished exterior, something had changed. The woman looking back at her wasn't just a pretty accessory anymore. She was a player in her own right. Miss Blanchard, Dexter's voice came through the phone, smooth and interested. What an unexpected pleasure. I understand you have something to share. Not over the phone. Arya's voice was steady, confident. But I think you'll find what I know extremely valuable, especially given Solomon's recent, aggressive moves. I see. She could hear the calculation in his tone. Perhaps we should meet to discuss this further. The Mark Hotel Bar, 7 p.m. She named Solomon's favorite hotel deliberately. And Mr. Wainwright, you might want to bring Ilara. After all, she knows better than anyone how Solomon operates when he feels threatened. After ending the call, Arya gathered her things and stepped out into the Manhattan morning. The city hummed with its usual energy, but everything felt different now. She was no longer just reacting to Solomon's games. She was changing them. Her phone buzzed one final time. Solomon again. Arya, don't do anything you'll regret. She smiled, slipping the phone back into her Hermes bag without responding. For the first time since she'd met Solomon Pierce, she felt truly powerful. Not because of who she was dating or what she was wearing, but because she had finally understood the most important rule of Manhattan's high society. The most dangerous player isn't the one with the most power, it's the one with nothing left to lose. And Solomon had made sure she had nothing left to lose but her silence. The Mark Hotel's bar exuded old-world luxury, all dark wood and amber lighting. Dexter Wainwright sat at a corner table, his fingers drumming an irregular pattern on the polished surface. The scent of his Acqua di Gio profumo mingled with the leather and whiskey aromatics of the space. Beside him, Alara watched the entrance with calculated casualness, her green eyes sharp and alert. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. "Arya could be setting us up." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Dexter replied, checking his watch. 7 p.m. exactly. Either way, we gain valuable intelligence. The click of heels on marble announced Arya's arrival. She looked stunning in a black Valentino dress, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves, but there was something different about her, a steel in her green eyes that hadn't been there during her time as Solomon's companion. "Mr. Wainwright, Ilara." She slid into the seat across from them, signaling the waiter. "Macallan 18, neat. Bold choice," Dexter commented. "Solomon's preferred drink, isn't it?" A slight smile touched Arya's lips. "Among other things I've learned from him." She turned to Ilara. "Thank you for breakfast this morning. It was illuminating." Before anyone could respond, movement at the bar's entrance drew their attention. Timothy Harrison stood there, his expression grave as he surveyed the scene. He pulled out his phone, and moments later, they all knew who he was texting. "Well," Arya said, accepting her scotch from the waiter, "I guess we can skip the pretense. Solomon will be here within 15 minutes. You planned this," Ilara realized, studying the younger woman with new respect. "Of course." Arya took a deliberate sip of her drink. "Solomon needs to understand he's not the only one who can play chess with people's lives." Dexter leaned forward, his blue eyes intent. "And what exactly are you offering, Mr. Blanchard?" "Information, strategy, insight into how Solomon thinks and operates when he's backed into a corner." She set her glass down carefully. "But more importantly, I'm offering you a chance to end this before it gets ugly." "It's already ugly," Ilara countered. "Solomon's NextCorp deal is a feint," Arya interrupted. "He doesn't care about NextCorp. What he really wants is—" The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Solomon Pierce appeared in the doorway. His dark eyes took in the tableau before him, and for a moment, raw emotion flickered across his features before his usual mask of control slipped back into place. "Well," he said, approaching their table with measured steps, his Tom Ford Oud Wood cologne announcing his presence. "This is quite the gathering, planning my downfall over drinks." "Joining us?" Arya asked sweetly, pushing an empty chair out with her foot. Solomon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I prefer to handle betrayal sober." "Betrayal?" Arya laughed, the sound carrying across the now quiet bar. "Is that what you call it when your possessions develop minds of their own?" "Careful, Arya." Solomon's voice was soft, dangerous. "You're playing a game you don't understand." "No, Solomon." She stood, facing him directly. "You're the one who doesn't understand. This isn't about business anymore. This is about power, and how you abuse it." Ilara watched the exchange with growing unease. She recognized the look in Solomon's eyes, the same look he'd had the night everything fell apart between them, that dangerous mixture of hurt and rage, carefully contained, but ready to explode. "This meeting is over," Solomon declared, his hand moving to Arya's elbow. She jerked away from his touch. You don't control me anymore. And after tonight, you won't control this narrative either." "What are you talking about?" Arya's smile was razor sharp. "Check your phone." Solomon pulled out his phone just as it buzzed with an alert. His face went perfectly still as he read whatever had appeared on the screen. "What did you do?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't do anything," Arya replied, "but it seems someone leaked details about certain offshore accounts to the Financial Times. Accounts that might raise some interesting questions about Pierce Enterprises' Asian market strategy." Dexter stood slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "I think we should continue this discussion somewhere more private." "There's nothing to discuss." Solomon's voice was ice. "My lawyers will." "Your lawyers can't help you, Solomon," Arya cut in. "Because the leak didn't come from me. It came from inside Pierce Enterprises. Someone who's tired of watching you destroy people's lives in your quest for power." Ilara felt the shift in the room's dynamics. She'd seen Solomon handle countless crises, but this was different. This was personal. "You're bluffing," Solomon said, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his tone. "Am I?" Arya picked up her purse. "I learned from the best, after all. You taught me everything I know about leverage and control." She turned to Dexter and Alara. "Shall we take this somewhere more appropriate? I believe your office is just around the corner, Mr. Wainwright." Solomon's hand shot out, grabbing Arya's wrist. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is." It was Alara who spoke, rising from her seat. "Let her go, Solomon. You've already lost enough tonight." For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Solomon released his grip. Arya stepped back, rubbing her wrist. "You know what your problem is, Solomon," she said softly. "You're so focused on controlling everything and everyone around you, you never stop to consider that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from the people you underestimate." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Dexter followed, his hand at the small of Alara's back as they left. Solomon remained standing, staring at his phone, his perfect composure finally showing cracks. Timothy Harrison approached cautiously. "Sir, the board is requesting an emergency meeting." Solomon didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the doorway where Alara had disappeared, his expression unreadable. "Sir?" Harrison pressed. "What should I tell them?" Finally, Solomon turned, and for the first time in years, he looked his age. "Tell them." He paused, straightening his tie with deliberate precision. "Tell them the game has changed." Outside, the Manhattan night was alive with possibilities. In a cab heading uptown, Arya finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alara. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. "Breakfast tomorrow." Arya smiled, remembering the look on Solomon's face when he realized he'd lost control. "Same place, same time," she typed back. In Dexter's town car, Alara leaned her head against the cool window, watching the city lights blur past. "Do you think she's telling the truth about the leak?" Dexter's hand found hers in the darkness. "Does it matter? The damage is done. Solomon's board will be in chaos by morning." Alara wasn't so sure. She'd seen Solomon weather worse storms, but something had been different tonight. In his eyes, when he looked at Arya, she'd seen something she recognized, the same desperate need for control that had driven her away. "What are you thinking?" Dexter asked, studying her profile. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that Solomon Pierce isn't the only one who needs to learn when to let go." The city stretched out before them, a glittering maze of power and ambition. Somewhere in a high-rise office, Solomon Pierce was plotting his next move, but for the first time, he wasn't the only one controlling the pieces on the board. The game had indeed changed, and no one, not Solomon, not Dexter, not even Alara herself, could predict where it would end. The morning headline screamed across every major financial news outlet. "Pierce Enterprises under investigation. Offshore accounts raise questions." Solomon Pierce stood in his penthouse bathroom, staring at his reflection as he adjusted his tie with mechanical precision. The Tom Ford suit felt like armor, the Rolex on his wrist a reminder of everything he'd built, and everything he stood to lose. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the story broke. Board members, shareholders, reporters, all demanding answers he wasn't ready to give. The only message he kept rereading was from Arya. "Now you know how it feels to lose control." A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Timothy Harrison entered, looking like he hadn't slept. "The SEC wants to move up the meeting. They're sending investigators this afternoon. Let them come." Solomon's voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath his composed exterior. "Everything's in order." "Is it?" Harrison placed a thick folder on the marble countertop. "Because what I'm seeing here suggests otherwise. The NextCorp deal structure mirrors some questionable transactions from your father's time." Solomon's hand tightened on his tie. His father's methods had always been aggressive, skating the edge of legality. It was a legacy Solomon had tried to modernize, to legitimize, but in his desperation to counter Wainwright's moves, "Get me everything on the NextCorp deal. Every document, every email, every phone log." He turned to face Harrison, "And find out who leaked those accounts. Someone inside Pierce Enterprises is playing both sides." "Already working on it." Harrison hesitated. "There's something else. Ilara's requesting a meeting." Solomon went perfectly still. "When?" Today, noon, her office at Wainwright Industries, the audacity of it, summoning him to her new territory, made his jaw clench. But beneath the anger was something else. Curiosity. What game was she playing? Clear my schedule. After Harrison left, Solomon poured himself a scotch. Despite the early hour, the familiar burn couldn't mask the bitter taste of how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. Arya's public betrayal he could handle, but the leak, that suggested a deeper rot within his organization. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Dexter Wainwright. Perhaps it's time we discuss terms. Solomon deleted the message without responding. He wouldn't give Wainwright the satisfaction. Not yet. Not until he understood the full scope of what he was facing. At precisely noon, Solomon stepped out of his private elevator at Wainwright Industries. The security guard's eyes widened in recognition, but Alara had apparently cleared his arrival. He was escorted directly to her corner office. She was standing at the window when he entered, the Manhattan skyline sprawling behind her. Her Chanel Coco Mademoiselle perfume filled the air, mixing with memories he'd tried to suppress. "Thank you for coming," she said, turning to face him. Her green eyes were unreadable, like I had a choice. He remained standing, refusing the chair she gestured to. "I assume you're enjoying the show." "This isn't what I wanted, Solomon." She moved closer, and for a moment, he caught a glimpse of the woman he'd known, the one who could see past his carefully constructed facades. The investigation, the public scrutiny. "It doesn't have to go this way, doesn't it? Your new boyfriend seems quite intent on dismantling everything I've built. This isn't about Dexter." Her voice sharpened. "This is about you, about what you've become, what I've become." He laughed, the sound harsh in the elegant office. "I'm exactly who I've always been, Alara. You just stopped wanting to see it." She shook her head, moving to her desk to retrieve a file. "No, the Solomon I knew, the one I loved, he understood the difference between power and control, between success and destruction. And Dexter understands that difference." He couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "Tell me, does he know about Dubai?" Alara went still. Dubai had been their secret, a deal that had crossed lines they'd both promised never to cross, a compromise they'd justified in the name of survival. "That's not fair, isn't it? You're so quick to judge what I've become, but you forget. You were right there beside me making the same choices, crossing the same lines, until I wasn't." She met his gaze steadily. "Until I saw what it was doing to us. To you." Solomon moved closer, close enough to see the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped the file. "Is that what you tell yourself? That you left to save me from myself? Or did you leave because you couldn't handle seeing your own reflection anymore?" "Stop." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You want to talk about what I've become?" He pressed on, his control slipping. "Let's talk about what you've become. The perfect corporate warrior, fighting for truth and justice alongside Dexter Wainwright. Tell me, does he know about the real reason TechCore was so eager to jump ship? About the promises you made, the information you leaked?" "I never leaked." "Don't." His voice was razor sharp. "Don't insult us both by lying. You might not have handed over documents, but you used everything you knew about Pierce Enterprises to help Wainwright structure his deals. You used our past, our secrets, to give him an edge." Alara stepped back, but Solomon followed, the space between them charged with unspoken accusations. "You're right," she finally said, her voice steady despite her pale face. "I used what I knew, just like you used Arya to try to prove you'd moved on, just like you're using NextCorp to try to maintain control. We're all using something, Solomon. The difference is I'm trying to build something new. You're just trying to hold on to the past." Her words hit home with devastating accuracy. Solomon turned away, moving to the window where Manhattan spread out below them, a concrete jungle of ambition and betrayal. "Call off the SEC investigation," he said finally. "Whatever game you and Dexter are playing, leave the regulators out of it." "It's not my game." Ilara's reflection appeared beside his in the window. Arya's leak came from inside Pierce Enterprises. Someone who knows about more than just the offshore accounts. Solomon's blood ran cold. There was only one person besides him who knew the full scope of Pierce Enterprises, operations. One person who had been there since his father's time. "Harrison," he breathed. Alara touched his arm gently, the first physical contact they'd had in years. "Go back to your office, Solomon. Look closely at the NextCorp documentation. Ask yourself why your most trusted advisor suddenly wants every detail about the deal structure. He jerked away from her touch. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed. She moved back to her desk, creating safe distance between them. Reform Pierce Enterprises. Clean up the operation. Show the board and the SEC that you're more than your father's son. And if I don't, then the next leak won't come from Harrison. She held his gaze. It'll come from me. Everything about Dubai. Everything about the deals we structured in those early years. Everything. Solomon studied her for a long moment, seeing not just the powerful woman she'd become, but shadows of the idealistic young executive he'd fallen in love with, the one who had believed they could change the system from within. You've learned to play the game well, he said finally. I had a good teacher. A sad smile touched her lips. Too good, maybe. As Solomon turned to leave, he paused at the door. Was any of it real? Us? You know it was. Her voice was soft. That's what made it so dangerous. The ride back to Pierce Enterprises was a blur of racing thoughts and strategic calculations. His phone buzzed with messages he ignored. Board members, lawyers, Aria, Dexter. But one message caught his eye, from an unknown number. The NextCorp files are in your private safe, the ones your father kept, the ones that show where the money really came from. You have 24 hours to make this right. Solomon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of legacy and lies pressing down on him. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Power isn't about being liked, son. It's about being feared. But as he thought about Alara's words, about Harrison's betrayal, about Arya's transformation from trophy to threat, he wondered if perhaps there was another way. A way that didn't require sacrificing everything and everyone he cared about on the altar of control. The question was he brave enough to find it? The Four Seasons presidential suite offered a panoramic view of Central Park, but Dexter Wainwright's attention was fixed on the Bloomberg terminal before him. Pierce Enterprises, the stock had dropped another 15% since the offshore accounts leak, and the market was buzzing with speculation about potential SEC violations. His Acqua di Gio Profumo mingled with the suite's rarefied air as he poured himself a drink. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Better than planned, really, thanks to Arya's unexpected alliance and Harrison's insider information. But something about Alara's mood since her meeting with Solomon left him uneasy. You're worried about her. Timothy Harrison's voice came from the suite's living area, where he sat reviewing documents. The older man had arrived an hour ago with a briefcase full of Pierce Enterprises' most sensitive files. Alara can handle herself, Dexter replied, but his tone lacked conviction. Can she? Harrison set down the papers he was reading. Because from where I'm sitting, she looks like someone fighting two wars at once, one with Solomon Pierce and one with herself. Before Dexter could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Arya. We need to talk, now. The St. Regis bar. He showed the message to Harrison. Think it's a trap. Solomon's too busy fighting fires at Pierce Enterprises to set traps right now. Harrison gathered his papers. But be careful. Arya Blanchard isn't just some scorned socialite anymore. 20 minutes later, Dexter found Arya at the St. Regis's elegant bar. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit that made her look older, more sophisticated than her 22 years would suggest. Thank you for coming, she said as he sat down. Her usual Dior J'adore perfume was replaced by something sharper, more professional. We have a problem. Solomon's not just looking into the leak anymore, he's digging into Dubai. Dexter's hand tightened imperceptibly around his whiskey glass. Dubai was years ago, before my time, but not before Alara's. Arya's green eyes fixed on him intently. Did you know about it? About what she and Solomon did there? I know enough. The deals in Dubai had made headlines in certain circles. Massive infrastructure projects, mysterious funding sources, questions that were never quite answered. No, you don't. Arya leaned forward. Because if you did, you wouldn't be so calm about Solomon investigating it. Whatever happened in Dubai, whatever lines Alara and Solomon crossed, it's bigger than the offshore accounts. Bigger than NextCorp. How do you know this? Because before Solomon shut me out, I saw something in his private safe. Documents about Dubai, with both his and Alara's signatures, and a name that kept appearing, Alexander Pierce. Solomon's father? Arya nodded. The deals in Dubai, they weren't just about money. They were about covering up something Alexander Pierce did before he died. Something that could destroy not just Pierce Enterprises, but anyone connected to those transactions. Dexter absorbed this, his strategic mind already calculating angles and implications. Does Harrison know about this? Harrison? Arya laughed softly. Harrison's the one who structured the Dubai deals in the first place. Why do you think he's really helping us? He's not some noble whistleblower. He's trying to protect himself before everything unravels. The bar's subtle lighting caught the worry in Arya's eyes as she continued. Solomon's desperate. He thinks if he can prove Ilara was equally involved in Dubai, he can force a stalemate, mutually assured destruction. He's bluffing, Dexter said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Is he? You've seen how he operates when he feels cornered. And right now, with the SEC investigation, the board pressure, the public scrutiny, he's more than cornered. He's dangerous. Before Dexter could respond, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. Breaking news. Pierce Enterprises had called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. It's starting, Arya murmured. Whatever Solomon found in those Dubai files, he's making his move. Dexter stood abruptly. I need to talk to Ilara. She's not at the office, Arya said. I tried calling her earlier. Her assistant said she left for the day. A cold feeling settled in Dexter's stomach. When? Right after her meeting with Solomon. Dexter was already moving, pulling out his phone to call his driver. He knew where Ilara would go, the same place she always went when the past threatened to overwhelm her present. The car ride to Brooklyn Bridge Park felt interminable. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the skyline in shades of gold and shadow. He found her exactly where he expected, sitting on a bench overlooking the water, lost in thought. How long have you known? She asked without turning around. Her Chanel Coco Mademoiselle perfume carried on the evening breeze. About Dubai? Not long enough. He sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Were you ever going to tell me? I thought it was buried. Done. She finally looked at him, her green eyes turbulent. Solomon and I, we made choices back then. Choices we justified because we thought we were protecting something bigger than ourselves. Alexander Pierce's legacy. She flinched slightly. You've been talking to Arya. She's worried. So am I. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Whatever happened in Dubai, we can handle it. But you have to be honest with me. Honest? A bitter laugh escaped her. Like you were honest about Harrison, about using him to get inside information on Pierce Enterprises? That was business. No. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. That was you playing the same game Solomon plays, using people, manipulating situations, all in the name of winning. I did it for us, Dexter protested. To build something stronger than what Solomon... Don't. Her voice cracked slightly. Don't pretend this was about us. This was about power, about beating Solomon at his own game. And I let myself believe it was different because I wanted so badly for it to be different. Understanding dawned in Dexter's eyes. You're going to tell him, aren't you? Warn Solomon about what Harrison's planning? I already did. She met his gaze steadily. Because whatever Solomon and I did in Dubai, whatever lines we crossed, we did it together. And I won't let Harrison use it to destroy everything just to save himself. Even if it means protecting Solomon. Even if it means protecting the truth. She touched his cheek gently. I'm sorry, Dexter, but I can't keep running from my past by hiding in your version of the future. He caught her hand as she turned to leave. The board meeting tomorrow. Solomon will expose everything. Dubai, Harrison, all of it. I know. A sad smile touched her lips. That's why I've called a press conference for first thing in the morning, before the board meeting. To say what? To tell my story. All of it. Before Solomon or Harrison or anyone else can use it as a weapon. She slipped her hand from his grasp. It's time to stop playing other people's games. As Dexter watched her walk away, the Manhattan skyline blazed behind her like a wall of fire. His phone buzzed. Arya again. Harrison's gone dark. Can't reach him anywhere. The pieces clicked into place. Harrison had never intended to be a whistleblower. He'd been setting them all up, playing both sides, waiting for the perfect moment to leverage the Dubai secrets for his own benefit. And now, with Ilara's press conference threatening to expose everything, all the carefully laid plans were unraveling. The question was, who would be left standing when the dust settled? Dexter pulled out his phone one last time, typing a message to Solomon Pierce. We need to talk, now, about Harrison, about Dubai, about everything. The response came almost immediately. My office, 1 hour. Bring everything you have. As his car headed back to Manhattan, Dexter realized that in their complex game of power and control, they'd all overlooked one crucial fact. Sometimes the most dangerous player isn't the one with the most to gain, but the one with the most to lose. And Timothy Harrison, keeper of Pierce Enterprises' darkest secrets, had everything to lose. Solomon Pierce's office was cast in shadows, the Manhattan skyline twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The scent of his Tom Ford Oud wood hung in the air as he reviewed the Dubai files spread across his desk. Each document was a piece of a puzzle he'd spent years trying to forget, a puzzle that was now threatening to shatter everything. A gentle knock interrupted his concentration. "Mr. Pierce? Mr. Wainwright is here. Send him in." Dexter entered, his Acqua di Gio profumo creating an invisible barrier between them. The two men regarded each other silently, years of rivalry and resentment hanging in the air. "Harrison's gone," Dexter said without preamble. "No one's been able to reach him for hours." "I know." Solomon gestured to a chair. He cleared out his office. "Took everything." "Not everything." Dexter placed a USB drive on the desk. "Aria found this in his personal safe at the Pierre. Apparently, he's been keeping a hotel suite there for months." Solomon picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. "What's on it?" "Everything. The real Dubai files. The ones that show what your father did, what Harrison helped cover up." Dexter sat down, his expression grim. "And what you and Alara were manipulated into doing to protect Pierce Enterprises." Solomon's jaw tightened. "We weren't manipulated. We made our choices." "Did you?" Dexter leaned forward. "Because according to those files, Harrison orchestrated the whole thing. He used your father's secrets to push you and Alara into positions where you had no choice but to play along." "Why are you showing me this?" Solomon's voice was dangerously quiet. "And why not use it to destroy Pierce Enterprises once and for all?" "Because Alara's planning to tell her story at a press conference tomorrow morning. And when she does, Harrison will make sure she takes all the blame." Dexter met Solomon's gaze steadily. "He's been planning this for years, waiting for the perfect moment to use Dubai as leverage. But now that Alara's threatening to expose everything, he'll destroy her to save himself." Solomon stood abruptly, moving to the window. "Where is she now?" "I don't know." After she left the park, Dexter's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. "She's gone to the Pierre." Solomon was already moving, grabbing his coat. "Harrison's playing us. He wanted us to find that USB drive. He wanted us distracted while he—" The rest of his sentence was cut off by another message on Dexter's phone. This one from Aria. "SOS. The Pierre. Suite 1601. Harrison has Alara." The ride to the Pierre was tense, both men lost in their own thoughts. Solomon's hand kept straying to his pocket, where the USB drive felt like it was burning a hole through his suit. "She told me, Dexter said suddenly, "about why she really left you. It wasn't just about the power plays or the control." Solomon's expression remained impassive. "Now isn't the time. She said she saw something in you change after Dubai, like you started believing your own lies about what happened there." Dexter's voice was quiet but intense. "She didn't leave because she stopped loving you. She left because she was afraid of becoming like you." The words hit Solomon like physical blows, but before he could respond, they arrived at the Pierre. The elegant hotel lobby was quiet at this late hour, but Solomon's presence commanded immediate attention from the staff. "Suite 1601, he demanded. "Security override, now." The hotel manager, recognizing both men, quickly produced a master key. As they rode the elevator up, Solomon finally spoke. "Whatever happens up there, protect her, even if it means exposing everything about Pierce Enterprises." Dexter studied him with new understanding. "You really do still love her, don't you? Some things are more important than power." Solomon's voice was barely a whisper as the elevator doors opened. They found Aria waiting in the hallway, her usual perfectly composed appearance showing signs of strain. "Harrison has a gun," she whispered. "He's been ranting about Alexander Pierce, about how everything was supposed to stay buried." Solomon pushed past her, approaching the suite door. From inside, they could hear Harrison's voice, agitated and desperate. "It was perfect," he was saying. "Everyone believed Alexander died from natural causes. The Dubai deals covered everything. But you had to start asking questions, had to start digging. Because people died, Tim. Alara's voice was steady despite the situation. The projects in Dubai, they weren't just about money laundering. They were about covering up what Alexander did to those workers. They were necessary sacrifices. Harrison's voice rose. Alexander understood that. Solomon understood that. Why couldn't you just play your part? Solomon placed his hand on the door handle, catching Dexter's eye. With a silent nod of understanding, Dexter moved to the other side of the door. Because some sacrifices are too high, Alara was saying. Because sometimes the truth matters more than power. Solomon burst through the door with Dexter right behind him. The scene before them was frozen in tableau. Harrison standing by the window, gun trained on Alara, who sat calmly in an armchair, her green eyes showing no fear. "It's over, Tim," Solomon said quietly. "We have everything. The real Dubai files. The proof about what my father did. What you helped him cover up." Harrison's hand trembled slightly. "You don't understand. I protected your legacy. Protected Pierce Enterprises." "No." Solomon moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You protected my father's crimes. Used them to manipulate everyone around you. Used them to control me. To control Alara." "Control?" Harrison laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You think this was about control? This was about survival. Your father's empire was built on bodies, Solomon. Bodies buried in Dubai's foundations. Bodies I helped hide because that's what loyalty meant." "Loyalty?" Alara stood slowly. "Or blackmail?" Harrison's attention shifted to her, his gun hand wavering. "You were supposed to be different. When Solomon brought you in, I thought finally, someone who could change things from within. But you were just like the rest. Weak. Afraid of what real power costs." "No, Tim," she said softly. "I was afraid of what it costs us as human beings. What it cost Alexander. What it's cost you." Something in her tone reached him. The gun lowered slightly. "I never meant. It wasn't supposed to." In that moment of hesitation, Dexter moved. The gun clattered to the floor as he tackled Harrison, subduing him with practiced efficiency from his boxing training. Solomon rushed to Alara, his hands checking her for injuries. The familiar scent of her Chanel Coco Mademoiselle wrapped around him, bringing back a flood of memories. "I'm okay," she assured him, but her hands were trembling slightly as they gripped his arms. "But Solomon, the press conference. We'll tell the truth," he finished. "All of it. About my father, about Dubai, about Harrison's manipulation. Whatever happens to Pierce Enterprises, some things matter more." She studied his face in the dim light, seeing something there she hadn't seen in years. The man she'd first fallen in love with, the one who believed in more than just power and control. "What changed?" she whispered. He touched her cheek gently, his voice rough with emotion. "I remembered what I lost. What really matters." As hotel security and later the police arrived, taking Harrison into custody, the four of them, Solomon, Alara, Dexter, and Arya, found themselves standing together in the luxury suite, united by secrets, finally brought to light. "So what happens now?" Arya asked, her voice small in the heavy silence. Solomon looked at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering longest on Alara. "Now we tell the truth, all of it, and we deal with the consequences together." Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered like scattered diamonds, a reminder of the power and wealth they'd all pursued. But in that moment, surrounded by broken illusions and newfound understanding, they realized that sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you can control, but in what you're willing to let go. Dawn was breaking over the city as they left the pier, each lost in their own thoughts about the coming day's revelations. But for the first time in years, they were all walking toward the truth instead of running from it, and sometimes, that's the most powerful move of all. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Pierce Enterprises' main conference room, where a small army of PR executives, lawyers, and board members had gathered for an emergency meeting. The air was thick with tension and expensive cologne, a peculiar mix of Tom Ford, Acqua di Gio, and the lingering traces of Chanel Coco Mademoiselle. Solomon Pierce stood at the head of the table, his Rolex catching the light as he reviewed the prepared statement one final time. Beside him, Alara sat with perfect posture, her green eyes focused on the stack of Dubai files spread before them. Dexter occupied a chair near the door, his presence both support and witness to what was about to unfold. The press is assembled downstairs. Rebecca Chen, head of PR, announced, All major networks and financial outlets are present. And the SEC representatives? Solomon asked without looking up. Already seated in the front row, Arya slipped into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. She'd traded her usual glamorous attire for a conservative black suit that made her look more corporate soldier than socialite. Harrison's being processed downtown. His lawyer is already talking plea deal. Let him talk. Solomon's voice was steel. The evidence speaks for itself. A board member cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Pierce, perhaps we should consider a less transparent approach. The implications for shareholder value are irrelevant compared to the human cost of our silence. Solomon finally looked up, his dark eyes sweeping the room. My father built this company on secrets and bodies. Harrison perpetuated that legacy through manipulation and fear. It ends today. And what about your legacy? Another board member challenged. Everything you've built will be rebuilt on truth. Ilara spoke for the first time, her voice carrying quiet authority. Sometimes destruction is necessary for genuine reconstruction. The room fell silent as Solomon moved to the window, looking down at the gathered media below. The morning headlines were already devastating. Pierce Enterprises scandal deepens, Dubai connections revealed, and Harrison arrested, 20-year cover-up exposed. Ms. Keene, Rebecca ventured carefully. The press will want to know about your role in all this, your relationship with Mr. Pierce, the Dubai deals. They'll get the truth. Ilara stood, smoothing her dress with steady hands. All of it. Dexter shifted in his chair. And Wainwright Industries, our partnerships, the Asian market deals, will be reviewed independently. Solomon turned back to the room. Everything we've built, both companies, needs to be examined in light of what we've learned. No more shadows, no more convenient lies. The intercom buzzed. Sir, they're ready for you. Solomon nodded to the room. Last chance for anyone who wants to distance themselves from what's about to happen. No one moved. The journey to the ground floor press room felt like a descent into another world. Ilara's hand found Solomon's in the elevator, a brief squeeze of support that spoke volumes about their shared history and the weight of what they were about to do. Ready? He murmured. Truth over power, remember? Her smile was small but genuine. The press room erupted in camera flashes as they entered. Solomon took his place at the podium, with Ilara and Dexter flanking him. Arya positioned herself near the back, watching the reporters with sharp eyes. Good morning, Solomon began, his voice steady. 23 years ago in Dubai, Pierce Enterprises began a series of infrastructure projects that would reshape the region's development landscape. What the world didn't know, what we've hidden for too long, is the human cost of those projects. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Under my father's direction, and with the collaboration of Timothy Harrison, Pierce Enterprises engaged in practices that led directly to the deaths of 37 workers. These deaths were covered up through a complex network of shell companies, falsified reports, and strategic investments that I, as CEO, perpetuated out of a misguided sense of loyalty and pride. The room erupted in questions, but Solomon pressed on. Ms. Keene and I were brought into these operations gradually, manipulated by Harrison into believing we were protecting something worth saving. We were wrong. The recent allegations about offshore accounts and market manipulation are symptoms of a deeper disease, a culture of power at any cost that has corrupted everything it touched. Ilara stepped forward then, her presence commanding immediate attention. I left Pierce Enterprises 5 years ago because I couldn't bear the weight of these secrets anymore, she stated clearly. My subsequent work with Wainwright Industries was an attempt to create change from the outside. But change, real change, requires more than just switching sides. It requires confronting the truth, no matter the cost. The questions came rapid fire. Mr. Pierce, will you be stepping down? Ms. Keene, were the recent Asian market deals connected to Dubai? Mr. Wainwright, what's your company's involvement in all this? Dexter stepped to the podium. Wainwright Industries will be opening all our recent deals to independent audit. Whatever connections exist between our operations and Pierce Enterprises need to be exposed and examined. As the press conference continued, Arya watched from her position near the back. She saw the subtle ways Solomon supported Ilara as she detailed her own involvement in Dubai. She noticed how Dexter's presence shifted from rival to ally as they presented a united front against the corruption they'd all, in various ways, enabled. But most importantly, She saw something she'd never expected to see in Solomon Pierce. Vulnerability. Real, human vulnerability, as he acknowledged his father's crimes and his own role in perpetuating them. Hours later, after the last reporter had left and the initial stock market shock had begun to settle, the four of them gathered in Solomon's office. The skyline was painted in late afternoon colors, a stark contrast to the somber mood inside. "The board wants an emergency session tomorrow," Solomon announced, loosening his tie. "They'll probably ask for my resignation." "They can ask," Ilara said quietly. "Doesn't mean you have to give it, don't I?" He turned to face her. "After everything that's come out, you're not your father, Solomon." Her voice was firm. "You chose truth over power. That means something. The markets don't seem to think so." Dexter gestured to his phone, where Pierce Enterprises' stock had fallen to historic lows. "Both our companies are taking a beating." "Good." Arya spoke up from her perch on the office couch. "Let it all burn down. That's how you build something real from the ashes." They all looked at her with varying degrees of surprise. "What?" She smiled slightly. "I learned a few things being arm candy to Manhattan's power players. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't listed on any stock exchange." Solomon's phone buzzed. A message from the district attorney's office. "Harrison's talking. About everything. Dubai, my father, all of it. Let him." Ilara moved to stand beside him. "No more secrets. No more control through silence." As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the office, they sat together, former enemies, lovers, and pawns united by the weight of truth finally spoken. The city below continued its endless dance of power and ambition, but in that room, something had fundamentally shifted. "So what now?" Arya asked the question they were all thinking. Solomon looked at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering on Ilara. "Now we rebuild. Not just the companies, but ourselves. Everything we've lost along the way. Together?" Ilara's question carried layers of meaning. "Together," he confirmed, "because some things are worth more than power. Some things are worth fighting for." Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, witnesses to promises made and truths finally acknowledged. The price of their honesty would be high, careers shattered, fortunes diminished, reputations forever altered. But as they sat there, united in the aftermath of their shared confession, they understood that sometimes the heaviest prices yield the most valuable rewards. The question was, were they ready to pay them? 3 months after the Dubai revelations, the Manhattan skyline remained unchanged, its glittering towers standing sentinel over a world that had shifted beneath their shadows. In his newly renovated office at Pierce Enterprises, Solomon Pierce stood at the window, his reflection overlaying the city vista, his Tom Ford Oud Wood cologne mixed with the fresh paint smell that still lingered in the air. The morning's Financial Times lay open on his desk. Pierce Enterprises emerges from scandal with reformed corporate structure. The article detailed the company's transformation, new board members, transparent governance, and a revolutionary ethical oversight committee. But it was the smaller headline below that caught his eye. Former executive Ilara Keene to head Global Compliance Division. His phone buzzed with a message from Arya. "Have you seen page 6? Manhattan's reformed power couple. Solomon Pierce and Ilara Keene navigate new waters together." A smile touched his lips as he recalled the journey of the past 3 months. The board meetings, the SEC investigations, the complete restructuring of both Pierce Enterprises and Wainwright Industries. But more importantly, the personal transformations that had come with facing the truth. "Mr. Pierce," his new assistant's voice came through the intercom. "They're ready for you in the conference room." The quarterly shareholders meeting would be different this time. No more shadows, no more carefully crafted half-truths, just the reality of a company rebuilding itself on a foundation of transparency. As he gathered his papers, another message arrived. This one from Dexter. "Good luck today. Remember, true power lies in transformation, not control." Their relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since the Dubai revelations. With Harrison's prosecution ongoing and both companies under scrutiny, they'd found common ground in their commitment to reform. Wainwright Industries and Pierce Enterprises were now partners in several ethical investment initiatives, proving that competition didn't have to mean destruction. The conference room was packed when Solomon entered. Shareholders, board members, and media representatives filled every seat, but his eyes found Ilara immediately, her presence at the head of the table both familiar and new. Her Chanel Coco Mademoiselle perfume reached him even before she turned to meet his gaze. "Good morning," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "3 months ago, we stood before you and exposed decades of corruption and manipulation. Today, we're here to show you what can be built from those ashes." Alara took over seamlessly, presenting the new compliance frameworks and ethical guidelines that would govern both companies' operations. Her green eyes sparkled with the same passion he'd fallen in love with years ago, but now it was directed toward something larger than either of them. "The question isn't just about profitability anymore," she explained to the assembled group. "It's about responsibility, about understanding that true success isn't measured in stock prices alone." From her seat near the back, Arya watched the presentation with knowing eyes. She'd transformed too, turning her social media influence into a platform for corporate accountability. Her latest post about ethical investment had gone viral, reaching millions of young professionals hungry for change. As the meeting progressed, Solomon found himself studying the faces around the table. Some were new, young, idealistic executives brought in to help reshape the company's culture. Others were veterans who'd chosen to stay and be part of the transformation. All of them represented a future he'd never imagined possible 3 months ago. After the shareholders dispersed, Solomon found Alara in her new office. The space was bright and open, so different from the shadowy corners where they'd once hidden their secrets. "Impressive turnout," she said as he entered. "They're curious." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "Everyone wants to see if the reformed Solomon Pierce is real or just another carefully crafted image. And is he?" She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Real, more real than I've been in years." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Thank you for believing it was possible." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dexter stood there, his Acqua di Gio Profumo announcing his presence. "Sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this." He handed them his tablet, open to a breaking news story. "Timothy Harrison accepts plea deal. Full cooperation in Dubai investigation." "It's really over," Ilara breathed. "No," Solomon corrected gently. "It's just beginning." Later that evening, they gathered at the rooftop bar of the Mark Hotel, Solomon, Ilara, Dexter, and Arya. The city spread out below them, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. To new beginnings, Arya raised her glass. She'd traded her signature Dior J'adore for a subtle new scent, another small sign of her own transformation. "And old lessons," Dexter added, his expression thoughtful. "We all played our parts in this story. Some stories need to end for better ones to begin," Alara said, her eyes meeting Solomon's across the table. The past 3 months had changed them all. Dexter had found purpose beyond competition, channeling his ambition into reforming the industry he'd once tried to dominate. Arya had discovered her voice beyond the socialite facade, becoming a respected advocate for corporate responsibility. And Solomon and Alara, they'd found their way back to each other, not through power or control, but through the shared commitment to something larger than themselves. "I have something for you," Solomon said quietly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out, not a ring, that would come later, when the time was right, but a key. "What's this?" Alara asked, taking it carefully. "The key to my father's private vault." His voice was steady but carried the weight of the decision. "The last of the Dubai documents are in there. Tomorrow, we turn everything over to the authorities." "Everything?" Dexter leaned forward. "That could implicate people beyond Harrison." "That's the point." Solomon met each of their gazes in turn. "No more secrets. No more protecting the powerful at the expense of the truth." Arya smiled, raising her glass again. "To the price of redemption, and to those brave enough to pay it," Ilara added, her hand finding Solomon's under the table. As the night deepened around them, they talked about the future, not just of their companies, but of the changes they hoped to inspire in the world of power and privilege they'd once navigated so carefully. The Manhattan skyline glittered behind them, unchanged yet somehow different in their eyes. They had lost fortunes, status, and the comfortable lies that had protected them for so long. But they had gained something far more valuable, the freedom that comes with facing the truth, the strength found in vulnerability, and the power of genuine connection. Solomon looked at Alara, seeing in her eyes the same hope he felt in his heart. They had walked through fire together, faced their demons and emerged stronger, not because they were perfect, but because they had finally learned that real power lies not in control, but in the courage to change. As the evening drew to a close, they stood together at the rooftop's edge, four people who had begun as rivals and emerged as allies in a greater cause. "Someone once told me that the true measure of power isn't in what you can control," Solomon said, watching the city lights below, "but in what you're willing to let go." "And what have you let go?" Arya asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "Everything I thought I needed." He turned to face them, his expression open and genuine, only to find everything I actually wanted. The night air carried the promise of change, of new beginnings built on honest foundations. They had paid the price of truth, faced the cost of redemption, and found something more valuable than all the power in Manhattan. They had found themselves, and in the end, that was worth more than all the empires they had built and lost. As they said their goodbyes, each heading toward their separate futures that were now inexplicably intertwined, they carried with them the understanding that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the game, it's in changing the rules entirely. The city would continue its endless dance of power and ambition, but they would dance to a different rhythm now, one built on truth, redemption, and the kind of power that comes not from control, but from the courage to be genuinely, unabashedly real. It was a new dawn in Manhattan, and they were ready to face it together. 1 year later, the New York Times Magazine's cover story caught the morning light streaming through the windows of Solomon and Alara's Central Park West apartment. Redefining Power: How Two Manhattan Titans Transformed Corporate Culture. The accompanying photo showed them together at the newly established Pierce Wainwright Foundation for Corporate Ethics, their body language reflecting both professional confidence and personal contentment. Solomon adjusted his Rolex, a habit that had survived all the changes of the past year, as he reviewed the final draft of his upcoming speech for Harvard Business School. The scent of his Tom Ford Oud Wood mingled with Alara's Chanel Coco Mademoiselle as she moved around their shared home office, preparing for her own day of meetings. Arya's TED Talk went viral overnight, Alara mentioned, showing him her tablet. The video, titled From Trophy to Triumph, Dismantling Power Structures from Within, had already garnered millions of views. "She's come a long way," Solomon smiled, remembering the young woman who had once been merely an accessory to his power plays. Now, at 23, Arya had become one of the most influential voices in corporate reform, her social media presence a powerful tool for change. His phone buzzed with a message from Dexter. "Tokyo deal approved. All ethical guidelines met. Dinner to celebrate." The relationship between Pierce Enterprises and Wainwright Industries had evolved into something unprecedented in the corporate world, a partnership focused on ethical growth rather than mere profit. Their joint ventures in Asia were setting new standards for corporate responsibility. Alara came to stand behind him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders as she read the message. The diamond ring on her finger, not the ostentatious graph from years ago, but a simpler, more meaningful design they had chosen together, caught the morning light. "Who would have thought?" she mused. "A year ago, we were all trapped in our own versions of power and control. And now," Solomon turned to face her, his dark eyes soft with understanding, "now we're changing the very definition of power." She smiled, touching his face gently. Together, later that evening, at their usual table in Le Bernardin, the same restaurant where their story of redemption had begun, the four of them gathered to celebrate more than just business success. Arya arrived first, her poise now coming from genuine confidence rather than careful calculation. Her latest initiative, a mentorship program for young women in finance, was already changing lives. Dexter joined them, his Acqua di Gio Profumo announcing his arrival. His transformation from corporate raider to ethical business advocate had inspired a new generation of entrepreneurs. As they shared updates about their lives and ventures, it was clear that their influence extended far beyond Manhattan's financial district. The Pierce Wainwright Foundation had established ethics centers at major universities. Arya's advocacy had sparked a movement among young professionals. Even Timothy Harrison's story had become a cautionary tale taught in business schools. "Did you see the latest numbers?" Dexter asked, showing them his phone. "Ethical investment funds, outperforming traditional portfolios across all markets. Turns out doing the right thing is good business," Solomon remarked, his hand finding Alara's under the table. "Speaking of good things," Arya smiled mysteriously, "wait until you see tomorrow's announcement. The Foundation's new initiative is going to change everything." They had all found their true paths. Solomon and Ilara had discovered that love could coexist with ambition when built on honesty. Dexter had learned that real power came from lifting others up, not pushing them down. And Arya had transformed her understanding of worth beyond the superficial trappings of wealth and status. As the evening drew to a close, they stood together on Le Bernardin's terrace, the Manhattan skyline before them, the same view that had witnessed their struggles, betrayals, and ultimate redemption. To the future, Ilara raised her glass. To change, Dexter added. To truth, Arya smiled. To love, Solomon concluded, his eyes meeting Ilara's. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder of the power they once chased. But now they understood something far more valuable. True power isn't measured in assets or control, but in the ability to create positive change. And in that, they had become the most powerful players of all. The end, based on this intense story of power, betrayal and redemption in Manhattan, a provocative question arises. If you were in Solomon Pierce's shoes, would you sacrifice all your hard-earned empire in the name of truth and true love? Or would you maintain your power and control by hiding the secrets of the past? Think about it. On the one hand, there's all the power, prestige, and financial empire you've built up over the years. On the other is the chance of redemption, true love and inner peace. But for that, you'd have to give up everything you've achieved and face the consequences of your actions. Which path would you choose? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.